Let's take a deep breath and look honestly at this. One of the great reasons men are quietly walking away from women today is not because they've lost interest in love or in partnership, but because of the crushing weight of expectations that so often sits on their shoulders. Men are being told implicitly and explicitly that to be worthy of affection, they must constantly perform. They must be providers, protectors, entertainers, therapists, and mind readers all at once. They are expected to be financially successful, emotionally available, socially confident, physically strong, spiritually grounded, and endlessly patient, yet at the same time, their own struggles, doubts, and needs are often overlooked. This burden doesn't just exist in romantic relationships. It echoes through culture, reinforced by movies, social media, and conversations that glorify a kind of perfect man, while quietly shaming those who fall short. Imagine the pressure. You're told that love is unconditional, but then you discover that your worth is measured in conditions: your income, your status, your appearance, your ability to anticipate and fulfill every need. For many men, it begins to feel less like a relationship and more like a performance where failure is inevitable. And when failure comes, it is met not with compassion but with criticism, sometimes even abandonment. Now, this isn't to deny that women face expectations too. They do, and some of them are incredibly heavy. But what is often missing from the conversation is balance. A man who feels like nothing he gives will ever be enough eventually concludes that perhaps the game itself isn't worth playing. And that conclusion doesn't come from bitterness, but from exhaustion. Because deep down, men crave to be valued not for the roles they can perform, but for who they are when all the noise is stripped away. They long for relationships where love isn't earned by constant achievement, but given freely through mutual respect and care. What happens when men feel like relationships demand more than they return? They retreat, not out of hatred, not out of weakness, but out of a desire to preserve their dignity and their peace. They turn toward their careers, their hobbies, their brotherhoods, and their personal journeys. They start to ask themselves, if my worth is only measured by what I provide, do I truly matter as a human being when I have nothing left to give? That's a haunting question, and it's one that drives many men to step back and protect themselves from a cycle. They feel they cannot win. We need to acknowledge this reality instead of dismissing it, because when we shame men for walking away, we fail to ask the deeper question, why are they walking away in the first place? And the answer, more often than not, is that the weight they carry has become unbearable. If love becomes an endless checklist of expectations, then love stops being love. It becomes a transaction, and men, just like women, do not want transactions, they want connection. They want recognition. They want to feel like their presence, not just their performance, is enough. When a man begins to believe that nothing he offers will ever be sufficient, he chooses silence over conflict, solitude over disappointment, and freedom over obligation. That choice should not be dismissed as selfishness. It is often self-preservation. And if we are to build bridges between men and women once again, we must have the courage to confront this truth. The weight of unrealistic expectations doesn't just push men away from women. It pushes them away from the very possibility of love itself. And until that weight is lifted, until respect and balance are restored, many men will continue to walk away not because they want to, but because they feel they must. Because at the end of the day, love cannot survive under the burden of impossible demands. It can only thrive in the freedom of mutual understanding and genuine respect. One of the most powerful driving forces behind the choices men are making today is the desire to protect their freedom and their peace of mind. For centuries, men were taught that sacrifice was the highest virtue in a relationship. Sacrifice your time, your money, your dreams, even your peace, And in return you would gain love, loyalty, and a family that would stand by you. But in the modern world, many men have discovered that the exchange is not always what it once was. They give and give, only to find themselves caught in cycles of constant conflict, unending demands, and little room to simply breathe. Peace of mind may sound like a small thing, but for many men it has become priceless. They have watched others around them, friends, fathers, brothers, lose not only marriages but also their sanity in the process. They've seen men drained of joy, trapped in relationships where every day feels like walking on eggshells, where their words are twisted, their actions questioned, and their intentions doubted. And they say to themselves, "Why would I voluntarily walk into that storm when I could choose a calmer path?" Freedom, too, plays a vital role. It isn't about selfishness or an unwillingness to commit. It's about the recognition that modern relationships often come with an expectation of control. Men fear that entering into certain partnerships means surrendering not just their independence, but their very identity. The hobbies that once brought them joy, the friendships that sustained them, the personal space that helped them recharge. All of these are at risk when they feel that a relationship demands complete assimilation into another person's world. It's not that men don't want to share their lives, they do. But they want to share them without the fear of losing themselves in the process. And so, when faced with the choice between solitude filled with freedom or companionship filled with conflict, more and more men are choosing solitude. They would rather sit in silence with their own thoughts than endure chaos in the name of love. They would rather pursue their passions, nurture their ambitions, and enjoy their peace than enter a situation where every day feels like a negotiation for survival. And here's the tragedy. Many of these men are not walking away because they despise women. They are walking away because they love their peace more than they fear their loneliness. They are walking away because they understand that their mental health, their clarity, and their freedom are not luxuries, they are necessities. They are the foundation upon which everything else in their lives is built. Without peace, even success feels empty. Without freedom, even love feels like a cage. This is where society so often misunderstands them. Men are not avoiding responsibility. They are rejecting relationships that strip away the very things that make life worth living. When a man feels that his freedom will be traded for constant monitoring, or his peace will be sacrificed at the altar of endless arguments, he concludes that it is better not to enter at all. And who can truly blame him? The longing for freedom and peace is not a weakness. It is a deep recognition of human dignity. It is a refusal to settle for a love that suffocates rather than liberates, a partnership that drains rather than uplifts. Men are not simply turning their backs, they are protecting their souls. And until we create a culture where relationships are built on respect for each other's individuality, on the preservation of peace, and on the freedom to grow alongside one another rather than under one another, men will continue to walk away, not because they want less from love, but because they expect more. Because a man would rather stand alone in peace than be shackled in the chaos of a love that costs him his freedom. One of the greatest unspoken truths about modern relationships is the price men pay when they choose to open their hearts. Emotional investment has never been free. It always carries a cost. To let someone in, to make yourself vulnerable, to share your fears, dreams, and insecurities, requires immense courage. And yet, for countless men today, that investment feels increasingly risky, because the security that once gave it meaning has been eroded. They look around and see stories of betrayal, divorce, infidelity, or sudden abandonment. They see friends stripped not only of their relationships, but also of their children, their homes, and their dignity. And they quietly conclude, If this is the possible outcome of giving everything, why should I give at all? Men are not emotionless, as stereotypes suggest. In fact, many carry deep wells of feeling, but they've learned through experience that those feelings can be weaponized against them. A man who confides his weakness may later see that vulnerability used to cut him down in a moment of conflict. A man who invests years into building a future with someone may watch it all unravel in the blink of an eye, with little regard for the weight of what he has lost. To lose a relationship is painful enough, but to lose it after giving every piece of yourself, to lose it without warning, without protection, without any assurance of loyalty, that is devastation. That is a wound that cuts so deeply many men never recover from it. So they hesitate, they guard their hearts. They withhold their trust, and it isn't because they don't want love. It's because they can't afford another collapse. They can't bear to invest years of emotional labor, endless sacrifices, and unwavering commitment only to discover that loyalty was not mutual, that promises were conditional, or that their efforts were taken for granted. Men long for security, not a guarantee that things will always be easy, but an assurance that the ground they are building on will not be pulled out from under them without warning. They want to know that the woman they give their soul to will not walk away the moment hardship arrives. Without that security, emotional investment feels like gambling with everything at stake and no safety net. And men, who are often told to be strong providers, feel the irony of being asked to provide stability in a world where their own emotional stability is anything but guaranteed. They are expected to risk it all, to love unconditionally, to trust completely, to give endlessly, while knowing that one wrong turn, one disagreement, one loss of affection could undo everything. That is not a fair bargain, and deep down they know it. This isn't a rejection of love, it's a plea for stability. Men are not asking for perfection, nor are they unwilling to endure struggle. What they want is the reassurance that when they give their heart, it won't be shattered by betrayal or discarded without thought. They want to believe that the person they choose will stand beside them, not only in times of joy, but also in times of difficulty. They want to trust that their emotional investment will not be wasted, that it will yield a partnership where both people are safe, supported, and deeply committed to one another. And so, when men see a culture that treats relationships as disposable, when they feel that commitment is fragile and loyalty uncertain, many choose to walk away altogether. They prefer to protect themselves from heartbreak rather than risk it again with no security. And though the world may call them distant or emotionally unavailable, what they truly are is cautious, wounded, and unwilling to gamble with the most sacred parts of their being. Because, in the end, no man wants to pour his soul into love, only to discover that he has built his life on quicksand. And this is why so many men would rather hold their hearts back than risk losing everything to a love that offers no security in return. If you look around at men today, you'll notice something interesting happening. Many of them are no longer chasing relationships with the same urgency they once did. Instead, they're turning inward, pouring their time, energy, and focus into themselves, into building their bodies, their minds, their careers, their businesses, their skills, and their futures. And this isn't because they've grown bitter or cold toward women. It's because they've realized that investing in themselves offers returns that no one can take away. In a world where relationships can feel unstable and loyalty uncertain, self-improvement has become a kind of anchor. It gives them direction, meaning, and control in a life that often feels unpredictable. For a long time, men were told that their highest value was found in providing for someone else. That to be successful meant building a family, serving as a husband, a father, a protector, and a provider. And while many men still desire those roles, they are waking up to the reality that devoting themselves entirely to others without first securing their own strength leaves them vulnerable. They see how fragile modern relationships can be, how quickly years of sacrifice can vanish, and they decide, if I'm going to give myself to someone, I need to first build myself into someone who cannot be easily broken. This shift is not rooted in selfishness, it's rooted in wisdom. Men are beginning to understand that purpose fuels resilience. That when they have goals, visions, and missions greater than themselves, they become stronger, more stable, and more capable of handling whatever life throws at them. And so, instead of centering their existence entirely around the pursuit of love, they are centering it around the pursuit of growth. They are lifting weights in the gym, not just to build muscle, but to build discipline. They are reading, studying, learning new skills, not just to earn money, but to expand their minds. They are starting businesses, developing trades, exploring passions, not because they're running away from connection, but because they're running toward purpose. And when a man has purpose, everything changes. He stands taller, speaks with more conviction, and carries himself with quiet confidence. His value is not defined by whether or not someone chooses him. It is defined by what he chooses to create, to become, and to contribute. In this sense, many men are realizing that solitude can be a gift. Without distraction, they have space to grow. Without constant conflict, they have room to build. Without pouring endlessly into someone who does not reciprocate, they finally have energy to pour into themselves. This rise of self-improvement is also an act of protection, because when a man develops himself, when he creates stability, strength, and direction in his own life, he is less likely to be shattered by loss. He knows who he is apart from a relationship. He knows his worth is not dependent on whether or not someone affirms it. And that inner security, that deep-rooted independence, allows him to walk into the world with dignity intact. Of course, this doesn't mean men don't want love. Many of them still do. But they're no longer willing to sacrifice their identity in order to get it. They're no longer willing to make a relationship the entire foundation of their lives. They want to be whole first, so that if love comes, it adds to their life rather than defines it. And if it doesn't come, they still have a life filled with meaning, direction, and fulfillment. This is why so many men are choosing the path of self-improvement. Because in a culture that offers little security in love, the one place where they can guarantee results is within themselves. That choice doesn't make them weak, detached, or unloving. It makes them wise. It ensures that when they do give their heart, they give it from a place of strength rather than desperation. Because in the end, a man who builds himself first does not walk away from love. He simply walks toward purpose and lets love catch up if it's meant to. One of the more sobering realities we must face is the growing distrust men feel toward modern relationship culture, and it's important to understand. This distrust is not born out of hatred or cynicism for its own sake. It's born out of experience, out of observation, out of seeing patterns that repeat themselves across society, and concluding that the risks may outweigh the rewards. Men are not blind. They see what is happening in the world around them. They see marriages dissolving at staggering rates, fathers separated from their children, loyalty traded for temporary excitement, and promises abandoned the moment difficulties arise. And they begin to ask themselves, why would I willingly step into a system that seems designed to fail me? The culture that surrounds relationships today is very different from the one of past generations. Social media has changed the landscape entirely. It has created an environment where constant comparison, validation, seeking, and attention chasing are normalized. A man might commit wholeheartedly to a relationship, but he lives with the awareness that his partner is one swipe, one message, one interaction away from temptation. And it's not that temptation itself is new. It has always existed, but the accessibility of it has never been greater. That awareness erodes trust, and without trust, the very foundation of love begins to crumble. Casual dating has also reshaped expectations. What was once a journey of deep courtship and gradual commitment has too often become a revolving door of short-term connections, each one more fleeting than the last. Men notice this shift. They recognize that effort, sacrifice, and emotional investment can easily be dismissed in a culture where relationships are treated as disposable. And so they hesitate to play the game at all. They step back not because they don't value love, but because they don't trust the culture in which love now has to survive. Even the language around relationships has changed. Words like forever and loyalty have lost weight in the modern context. Promises are made more casually, and commitments are broken more easily. For men who often thrive on stability and long-term vision, this uncertainty becomes unbearable. They long for a relationship where they can rest, where their efforts will be matched, where their devotion will be honored. But what they see around them suggests that such relationships are rare, if not endangered. This distrust is not something men celebrate. It weighs heavily on them. Many want nothing more than to believe again, to give themselves freely, to experience the beauty of partnership without the constant fear of betrayal. But when they observe the instability of the system, when they hear stories of others who gave everything only to be left with nothing, they feel a duty to protect themselves. They conclude that stepping away is safer than stepping in. And yet, it would be a mistake to assume men are turning away from women themselves. They are turning away from the culture that has wrapped itself around modern relationships. They are rejecting the shallowness, the disposability, the endless distractions, the erosion of trust. They are not saying, "I don't want love." They are saying, "I don't trust the environment in which love is supposed to grow." And until that environment changes, until commitment regains its weight and loyalty regains its meaning, men will continue to build their lives in other directions. Because, no matter how much love a man may be capable of giving, he will not hand it over to a culture that treats love like a commodity to be traded and discarded. For in the end, love cannot bloom in soil poisoned by distrust. It requires honesty, loyalty, and a culture that still remembers the sacredness of commitment. At the heart of everything we've been talking about lies something very simple, yet profoundly overlooked: the yearning men have for respect and balance in their relationships. It is not extravagance they seek, nor endless praise, nor constant indulgence. What they desire most is to be treated as human beings worthy of dignity, appreciation, and fairness. And when that is missing, when a man feels like his sacrifices are unnoticed, his efforts taken for granted, or his voice silenced, something inside him begins to break. Respect is not about superiority or domination. It is about mutual recognition, the acknowledgement that both individuals bring something valuable to the relationship. Men want to know that the work they do, whether it is providing materially, emotionally, or spiritually, is not dismissed as simply expected, but is seen, valued, and reciprocated. They want to know that when they give, it isn't into a bottomless pit, but into a partnership where their presence matters just as much as their performance. Balance is the other side of that coin. Relationships cannot flourish when one person is constantly carrying the weight, while the other only demands. Men are beginning to see, with increasing clarity, that too many dynamics in modern relationships are lopsided. They are asked to provide security, strength, financial stability, and emotional resilience, while in return they sometimes receive criticism, distrust, or indifference. Over time, this imbalance wears them down. It teaches them that no matter what they give, it will never be enough. And eventually, they conclude that walking away is not an act of defeat, but an act of self-preservation. But let's not misunderstand, men are not rejecting the idea of relationships altogether. What they are rejecting is relationships without respect. They are turning away from love that demands without giving, from partnerships that expect without appreciating, from commitments that consume without replenishing. What they long for instead is equilibrium, the kind of relationship where both partners lift each other up, where giving is mutual, where sacrifice is honored, and where love is expressed not only in words, but in actions that affirm each other's worth. This longing for respect and balance is not trivial. It speaks to something deep within human nature. Men, like women, crave to be seen. They crave acknowledgement that their struggles are real, that their pain matters, that their devotion is not invisible. When a man feels respected, he will move mountains for the person he loves. When he feels balanced in the relationship, he will give without hesitation, sacrifice without resentment, and protect without fear. Respect and balance do not just make love sustainable, they make it transformative. Yet in a culture where disrespect has become normalized, where belittling jokes about men are brushed off as harmless, where sacrifice is expected but rarely acknowledged, men are increasingly concluding that the scales are tipped too far. They would rather be alone, carrying their burdens quietly, than remain in spaces where their value is constantly questioned or dismissed. And while some may accuse them of weakness for walking away, the truth is the opposite. It takes strength to reject a dynamic that erodes your dignity. It takes strength to say, I will not stay where I am disrespected. I will not pour into something that never pours back. In the end, men are not walking away from women, they are walking toward respect. They are walking toward balance. They are walking toward lives where they can give and receive equally, where they can love without losing themselves, where they can be strong without being exploited. That is not selfishness. That is the deepest kind of self-respect. For no man will remain where he is merely tolerated, he will only stay where he is truly respected, valued, and loved in equal measure. When you step back and look at all of this together, a clear picture begins to emerge. Men are not walking away from women because they despise them, or because they have given up on love. They are walking away because the very foundation of what makes relationships meaningful, trust, balance, respect, peace, security, has been shaken. They are choosing solitude not out of bitterness, but out of a deep desire to protect their dignity, their freedom, and their purpose. And while some may mock them, calling them detached or unwilling, the truth is that these men are simply refusing to live in relationships that diminish rather than elevate them. But this is not the end of love nor the death of partnership. It is a call for something better. It is a challenge for all of us to create relationships that are rooted in respect, built on balance, and anchored in loyalty. It is a reminder that love cannot survive as a performance, a transaction, or a game. It can only thrive when both people step into it with honesty, appreciation, and a willingness to stand together. Through the storms, the men who are walking away are not rejecting women, they are rejecting the conditions that make authentic connection impossible. And until those conditions change, the silence of their absence will continue to speak louder than any words. Because in the end, love is not about control or sacrifice without return. It is about two people choosing each other fully and freely in respect, in trust, and in truth. That is the only kind of love worth staying for.